In the world of macro photography, most of the discussions seem to be about gear and the best setups and other similar topics. But in my opinion, the gear you have is only a very small part of capturing great images. As long as you have a functioning DSLR or mirrorless camera with either a macro lens or even a kit lens with extension tubes, it is still possible to take great photos with it. So in this video, instead of covering any gear, I will provide some tips that can help you creatively enhance your macro shots for added impact and value. The most important aspect of a good and creative macro image is a good composition. How you frame your subject and the angle you shoot them from should be your number one priority if your goal is to take the best shot possible, because the composition will make or break your photo. You could have everything going right for your photo, such as good sharpness on the subject and a clean background, but if the composition and the angle you shot your subject at is a boring angle, then that image won't stand out. Composition in macro photography is all about trying to showcase the subjects you photograph in a different and unique way, and there are some compositional techniques which I will briefly explain in this section of the video. The first technique I want to talk about is the POV angle, which just means shooting from the same vantage point as the subject. This is very important because shooting at the same level as your subject creates a feeling of intimacy, which is important in any type of wildlife photography. Every image doesn't have to be at eye level, but I definitely think that the majority of your images should be taken at this angle. The next thing to consider is how to frame the elements in the scene. The rule of thirds offers another guideline for maintaining balance. This guideline will help place your subjects in the left or right third of an image, leaving the other 2/3 more open. The majority of my photos are either centered, or I will use this guideline to help me frame an image the way I want. The next thing to consider is the extra space in your image, also known as negative space or lead room. The use of appropriate negative space contributes greatly to a sense of balance in the image. It doesn't have to be overly drastic to be effective either. You want enough additional space in the direction to which the eyes are looking to give the image room to breathe. Also, just by showing some of the environment in your photos will give them much more context than tight crops. The good thing is that every photo you take doesn't have to follow those guidelines, because tight crops or images where your subject is centered can work just as well. This composition style works great with portrait shots where your subject is looking directly at your camera, or if you are going for a more abstract look. The purpose of this style is to show off the beauty of a subject up close and personal, and reveal those hidden details on them that can't be seen with the naked eye. Tight crops and portraits can really bring a photo to life because most macro subjects are so tiny, and being able to see a detailed shot up close of any plant or bug can be really eye-opening, and it can help the viewer view them differently. When it comes to composition, it's important to just experiment and try different styles to figure out what works best for you. Every photo you take doesn't have to follow a guideline, because it's completely okay to break the rules, and sometimes that's the best way to go. But always put some thought into it, because in my opinion, the composition is the most important aspect of a good macro photo. Tip number 2 is to tell a story with your photos, and there are several ways you can achieve this. As with all forms of photography, timing and composition, like I mentioned previously, are very important. Once you find a subject you want to photograph, take your time and observe the scene. Think about the possible angles and perspective you want to go for before you begin shooting. The first method of telling a story through your photos is to show off the natural environment around your subject. These types of shots will be a wider view of the subject and the environment around it. Wider view shots can do something that close-up shots can't do as well, which is they can help give you a better glimpse into the world of the subjects you're photographing. The most important factor that can help you capture these types of shots is your aperture. I recommend having your aperture between f2.8 and 5.6, and this will provide a nice smooth background, removing most distracting elements from the photo. The second type of shot that can really help tell a story, and I mentioned this earlier, and that is a portrait style shot. Not only do these kinds of shots showcase the beauty of a subject up close and personal, but they can be very hard to pull off. This style sometimes will require you to shoot at a 1:1 magnification or even higher at times, and the challenges of shooting at higher magnifications is the depth of field is even more shallow and your working distance is shorter as well. To combat the shallow depth of field, you will have to shoot a focus stack, which is the combination of multiple images to increase the depth of field in a shot. I have multiple videos covering focus stacking, so if you are interested in learning more, I will have a video on the end screen covering that topic more in depth. To combat the shorter working distance, I recommend shooting insects in the early morning hours because they are more likely to stay still during those hours because most bugs are still at rest, which makes getting closer to them easier. The next type of shot that can really tell a story is action shots. And what I mean by action shots is to photograph your subjects doing something or on the move. A few examples include photographing pollinators such as bees and butterflies, collecting nectar from flowers. Another example includes a predator eating its prey, and a mating pair of bugs. Action shots are my personal favorite type of shots because showing their behaviors can give us a better insight into their lives and help us learn more about them. What is needed to get the most out of these types of moments is a combination of everything: an interesting composition, good timing, and a lot of patience. The last bonus tip I have for storytelling is to take a photo series. Sometimes one photo may not be enough, so occasionally I will take a series of shots. Like this first example here, I was trying to photograph a mantis that wouldn't stay still at first, so I started off by taking full body shots. Once it started to settle down, I got closer in an attempt to get a stacked portrait shot, but then mid-focus stack, it started cleaning its forelegs, but I continued taking pictures anyway. I eventually did get the portrait style shot that I wanted, but I do think all the other photos plus the portrait make a good series of shots. Another example on when I would shoot a series is if there's a lot going on in the scene, such as this example here. I found a cluster of ants and aphids on this branch that I wanted to photograph. Ants and aphids have an interesting relationship. The ants will collect honeydew from them while the ants provide protection against predators to improve the hygiene of the aphid colony. Scenes like this can be pretty chaotic since the ants are usually constantly moving around trying to collect the honeydew from the aphids, and that makes it very challenging to just focus on trying to get one shot. So instead, I took a lot of shots of different ants and aphids in the scene. My last tip is to pay attention to your backgrounds. It can sometimes be easy to get caught up in the moment and forget about everything else except for the subject you are trying to photograph, but the backgrounds play a huge role in macro photography. A messy background with distracting elements can pull the eye away from the main subject, and that can completely ruin a photo. My personal goal with every shot I take is to achieve the best background possible in camera, so I don't have to spend that extra time in post-processing to remove those distracting elements. It makes things so much easier when you get it right in camera. Once you find a subject you want to photograph, get in the habit of looking at the whole frame when looking through your viewfinder or LCD screen. Examine the whole frame and be aware of what is happening in the background. Giving yourself more time to observe the scene is essential for learning to see and control all the variables needed to create great images. When it comes to backgrounds, your aperture is the most important setting because it controls the depth of field in a shot. The more open your aperture is, the less depth of field you will have, which also means smoother backgrounds. Higher apertures will produce a greater depth of field, which means more of your subject will be in focus, but also background elements will be more in focus as well. But depth of field isn't just determined by your aperture. Other factors that play a role are how far away the background is and the magnification you are shooting at. The higher the magnification you are shooting at, the smoother the background will be because of the loss of depth of field at those magnifications. Like I mentioned earlier, focus stacking at high magnifications will help with the loss of depth of field. If you are shooting a full body shot of a bug at a lower magnification and you are close to the background, an open aperture will be needed to create good separation from the subject and the background. The further away your background is from your subject, the better chances you will have of having the smoothest background possible. But depending on the lighting, your shots will come out with a darker background. A good example would be if you are shooting something that is in a shaded area and you have a good distance between your subject and the background, the shot will more than likely come out with a darker background if you are using a flash. Other ways to achieve better backgrounds are just simply changing the angle and perspective you are shooting at, because simply changing the angle can create a totally different photo with a completely different background. But if that's not an option, you could use some macro background cards or something colorful to place behind your subject while you are shooting. You don't need the best setup or the most expensive gear to implement these tips into your photography and to take creative macro photos. There are many more important elements that go into taking better photos, and the most important one from this video is understanding composition. Once you finally start to get a great understanding of composition and the best angles to shoot from, everything else that I mentioned in this video will come naturally the more time you put into your photography. It took me years to truly understand the best compositions and perspectives to shoot from, and me having a better understanding now has helped me improve my photography along the way. I truly feel like anyone who is watching this video has the ability to take some amazing photos, but it all starts with the effort you put into your craft. I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content like this. I'll catch y'all in the next one.